At the end of the
Community Development Agency, discussion of possible action relative to board direction to staff regarding potential adoption of an ordinance to establish provisions for limited density owner-built rural dwellings. Mr. Story, good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I think that's what I was checking there. Aaron Story, Community Development Director. Before you is a draft ordinance for limited density owner-built rural dwellings. Over the past year, the Public Works Committee has met to discuss this ordinance, and Title 25 of the State Housing Law under Article 8 establishes regulations for limited density owner-built rural dwellings. Again, the purpose of Article 8 is to provide minimum requirements for the protection of life, limb, health, property, safety, and welfare of the general public and the owners and occupants of limited density owner-built rural dwellings and appurtenant structures. It is also the expressed purpose of this article to conform the regulations regarding the construction and use of limited density rural owner-built dwellings and appurtenant structures to the requirements of Article 1, Section 1 of the California State Constitution and the statutes of the State of California. It is a responsibility of the local agency to adopt regulations as outlined in Article 8. Amador County currently does not have a code section adopted to address provisions of Title 25, Article 8. The Public Works Committee has reviewed the ordinances adopted by various other rural counties. The result is the attached draft Chapter 15.10 of the Amador County Municipal Code. As drafted, Chapter 1510 establishes the conditions which must be satisfied in order for the dwelling to be considered limited density owner-built rural dwelling. The Public Works Committee recommended that the draft of 1510 be presented to the full board for direction. So with that, I'd entertain any questions that you guys may have regarding the ordinance as drafted. It's not a hearing today. We'd need to have advertised for a public hearing at a subsequent meeting if that's the desire of the board to move forward with this ordinance.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll just add that this actually came about as a result of some discussions at RCRC that came through in one of our supplemental packets where someone at RCRC had mentioned this and the response to this this article. What is it? Excuse me here. Article 8, Chapter 15, or Chapter 25. Sorry, I'm getting Title 25 of Article 8. Sorry, at the state level, yeah. But it has actually been in existence in the California building codes and so forth for 20-plus years. And like Mr. Brusatori said, we spoke with Mendocino County and Butte County and Humboldt and host of others. There's some down south too that we looked at that had all adopted this provision in one form or another in their counties, and just thought it's something that might help folks in Amador County. I know we opposed a few years ago the state fire marshal's requirement of sprinkler systems in all new residences and so forth, and this is a provision that allows people to build to earlier code standards and thereby avoid some of those requirements that state level bureaucrats have come up with in the last few years.
Would this allow you to get around the new requirements for putting in sprinklers in a structure?
I believe so.
Yes, it would. However, you got to keep in mind that there would be a recording against your house that you built it according to limited density owner-built rural dwelling standards, so that any subsequent purchaser of that property would understand that that's how the project was built, the home was built or structured.
I think where it might be real helpful too is if you have, there's a lot of existing homes that are out there that were built intentionally or otherwise, some without a permit, and it may allow these people to bring these, if they want to bring these homes in the system, they can do without just getting financially, just wiped out.
If I could make a comment to that point, when I spoke to Mendocino County and Humboldt County, they said that one of the benefits of this program was it was allowing people who had previously built structures without permits to bring their structures into compliance. So now that they had a permitted structure as a limited density owner-built rural dwelling, the houses, that were built in the 70s, 80s, they weren't necessarily structurally deficient. They just haven't met the energy requirements or the lateral and gravity analysis that's required by current code standards. And the houses have been standing for quite some time. They're of sound structural integrity.
Mr. Bustori, so I'm hearing conflicting things here. Will this code or this title or this section, Title 25, Article 8, will this let someone live in a house, a totally constructed house that has never had any permit fees attached to that house?
No.
Okay.
These require the payment of fees. It doesn't forgive people of fees. It forgives them of some of the provisions of the most recent building code standards.
And an example, let me throw this out. So you personally have a 2,500 square foot house, and you built an added bathroom on it, and you didn't take out any permits or any fees to add that bathroom on. This will allow you to bring that bathroom into compliance in codes?
This could do that. If it's located on a parcel of land that's 1 acre or larger and it meets the other requirements of the section, that would be a possibility. They would still have to pay their fees that are due, but...
And it's still got to meet code.
It says the chief building official may refund up to 80% of the permit fee, subject to the following limitations.
That's if someone applied for a LDRD permit and never moved forward with it. They came forward and said, hey, I want to build a house, a cabin, whatever, here's all my fees, and 5 years later they haven't built it, and they want to get a refund of those fees.
I don't know. I know there's people out there that have unpermitted homes that the tax collector don't even know they're in existence. That's the thing I have a problem with. People go out and pay their fees, get the permits, and they're honest about it, and the people that skate are being rewarded.
Hopefully this would provide an avenue where some of those homes could be brought into conformance because they wouldn't have to re-engineer their whole project or bring it up to a current building code. They would have to demonstrate for the building official or his or her designee that it was a safe house. The electric, the plumbing flows downhill, the electrical is ground fault interrupted. It's going to, people are not going to.
That section I just read to you was from the fees for permits and inspection on page 8, 15.10.190. Talks about people required to obtain a building, plumbing, electrical, heating, or comfort cooling permit under this chapter. So by building, that's going to be, that could be their initial permit too, couldn't it?
Could you clarify your question? I was trying to read along.
Well, I'm going over to, you got A, B, and C. I'm going over to C where they can get
Page 9 then.
80% of the permit fee back, subject to the limitations. So doesn't this reduce their permit fees? They could get a refund for it?
No, it does not. It's saying that in C, the building official may refund up to 80% of the fees subject to the following. If the fees allocated to the plan checking are not refunded after the building department has started the plan review. So if we started to incur costs on plan review, we can't refund that portion of the fees, number one. If they paid for a building permit but they never built the structure, then we can issue a refund at that point in time. And then if the permit was canceled within 60 days of the issuance, then we can refund fees.
All of these must apply to get a refund. So when you're not going to get the plan check, you have to not have built, you have to cancel it. There has to be more than $10.
Yeah.
But I mean, they all apply. So the only time you get a refund or get your money back is if you don't commence. You pull the permit and you don't, like you said, go forward.
Yeah.
Not a general reduction.
And it's just the permit fee, too. It's not impact fees and so forth. It's
That's correct.
permit.
Impact fees, current impact fees are still due.
So then who's going to oversee that this property is not intended for sale, lease, rent, or employee occupancy, and was going to be the hammer on that. And there's a correction on page 6, just on number C, heating capacity, the use of solid fuel or solar heating devices. I think that should be heating devices.
Where are you at on that?
Right here.
Section 6.
Oh, okay.
I probably could use one of those solar hearing
Solar
devices.
hearing devices.
Aaron, on page 10, it says under D, let's see, under C. No, it is under D, the third line. Proof of sale, leasing, or renting for the offering for sale, lease, rent, structure by the owner builder within 1, then it has 3 year after completion of sale. Is that 1 or is it 3? Now, I think it's 1 because when you go to the
1
agreement,
3-year
to the
period.
actual agreement, it says 1 year.
1 3-year?
Only 1 3
I'd
years.
have to review the notes. I think you may be correct there, though. 1 year.
I think it is 1 year. I'm thinking it should be more like 3 years, because if somebody's getting a big ability to do these kind of things, then they shouldn't turn around and sell the property right away.
Well, actually, there's some other issues there. It shouldn't be after completion of sale, should be after completion of construction, or something along that line. Little glitch there.
Wordsmithing, maybe.
Yeah, after completion of construction is presumptive evidence that such structure was undertaken for the purposes of sale, lease, or rent. I believe earlier in the chapter it specifies 1 year.
I think 1 year is enough. You're going to give people the ability to do this, and yes, they could turn around after that 1 year and dispose of the
So
property.
they'd build a house and sit on it for a year after final to turn around and sell it. And then there's also a secondary provision that says only one of these permits will be, or 1 or 2 of these permits will be offered in any 5-year period.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
I don't remember where that is, but
Aaron, is this going to affect...
oh, it's 15.10.120 on page 5.
Yeah, 566 is
Oh, excuse me.
permanent beyond
No.
5 years without paying.
No, that's the extension of 5 years. Frequency, page 4, bottom up. No more than 2 building permits of initial construction of an owner built shall be issued to the same person in any 5-year period. It keeps that abuse from,
That's sufficient?
well, that was the goal of that cause, was to keep it from being abused by a spec builder.
This was at the Public Works Committee, correct?
Yes.
More than once?
Yeah.
Yeah, for the last year.
I had heard that, so that's why I wanted to ask that question.
Talking about insurability is, I mean, these people probably already have issues getting insurance, but if their homes are in need of some repair or additional work, if someone constructs a home like this, would it affect the insurability?
I can't speak to that at all. I would encourage someone to check that out before they went to construction, because
Could they get a loan on it?
We didn't get
That'd
any.
be the other thing.
We didn't get any comments to that effect from any of the other building officials we spoke to in the other counties.
And what else I will say is we've got homes out there right now that are sitting on, 3 rocks piled up as far as the foundation, and they get insurance. It's kind of what an insurance company wants to do.
Yeah.
Well, if the code, the standard code now requires sprinklers, subject to some conditions, if a person doesn't put sprinklers in, would that affect their insurability?
They could put a tank in.
My home doesn't have sprinklers, and I have insurance.
You could put a tank in. You could put a water tank in.
Yeah, but once you build it, that's the thing.
Offset.
But your home was built prior to the condition going in, I believe.
Sure.
Yeah, so was mine. I have no problem getting, I said, so was mine. I got no problem getting insurance.
I just don't want to make a problem for our building department or for the residents who think that this is the best thing since,
Well, the other thing is, about a year or so ago, we heard from Wendell Peart about insurability upcountry for housing. So I don't want to get crosswise with that situation.
That is a big concern with upcountry insurance.
I could see this thing. I kind of like the hunter shelters, guest cottages, and a few of those things, but
I do too, opening it up countywide to the unincorporated area. We need a trial period before we do that.
There's been trial periods in other counties. They've had it. It's been around for
20
quite a
years.
while.
Maybe Amador County needs a trial period. On page 2, Aaron, it says the intent of this is allowing people to use substitute materials and procedures and alternatives. Specification prescribed by the Uniform Technical Codes to the extent that a reasonable degree of health and safety is provided by these modifications. How do your building officials, looking at alternative materials and everything else, have they been trained enough to look at what a reasonable degree of health and public safety is with the modifications?
The structures built under this provision would typically be of a conventional construction standard. If they're using other materials, they would have to propose those materials and they'd each be evaluated. It depends on what material they're providing. If they're one of the provisions on this, it could be non-graded lumber. If someone has a piece of property in the mountains and they fell the timber on site and it's not non-graded, but they build their house out of it, that would be one of those materials, an example of a substitute material.
And actually, I had a change on that item under the ordinance page 2, where we're talking about, I thought after use of, it could put in owner-produced materials, because when I built my house, that was something I ran into. I have some, I did logging for a number of years and had some nice timber, and I wanted to cut some trees to use in my house because it would be real good quality lumber. And what it came down to is unless you could find somebody who has a grade stamp to stamp the lumber, I couldn't use lumber that I had cut or would have cut, and it would have been superior to what I could buy. But it's very expensive to get a grader to come out, and they got to be there, and they got to stamp each one as you're doing it. Finally I just gave up and said the heck with it. But I would have liked to have done it, and there's no provision where I could.
Well, and doesn't it also allow for the use of like a wood siding, if you want to do board and bat siding or something outside of the 7A requirements?
I believe outside of the the 7A, that's the fire requirements.
Yeah, which the 7A requirements apply to anything in the unincorporated area of the county. Kind of a one-size-fits-all. Venting and construction materials, siding materials, there's a host of 7A requirements that come into play there, and yet they don't apply. If your house is in the unincorporated area and it's adjacent to a house inside the city limits, the one in the city limits doesn't require 7A requirements, but the one outside does.
And that venting is fireproof venting, the new stuff.
Say it again.
Well, it's designed to keep ashes from drawing up through a soffit vent.
Yeah, they call it fireproof venting.
No, I see this ordinance as being a good thing. I think a number of things that give people a little more flexibility, I guess a little bit. And also, there's a number of structures out there. I've had it before where people are selling a home, and I can't remember the exact details, but they're having an issue because the home was built, and I'm sure when they did it, it was done with the correct materials that would have met code, but I think they hadn't got a permit, and they were trying to sell a home, and didn't have the correct windows for the modern standard. Well, this was done like 25, 30 years previous, and in order to go through and be brought up to code, they had to go through and basically rip out those windows, and it was kind of a real mess. And I think this would be something where they could come under that, and it would bring people into compliance. Otherwise, it's going to be financially probably infeasible to bring these homes into compliance that are out there. And there's a lot of them out there. I mean, there's a lot of homes out there, I'm sure that.
With that example, under this scenario, again, that person would have a recorded agreement on their property that says that their window,
This is
their
what
project was built or permitted according to the LDRD provisions. Now, a buyer may see that when they get a title report, this is something that will show up, an agreement will show up with a title report, and that would trigger the asking of the question, what does this mean? What was what was different about this one versus, the next house down the street that I'm looking at? And that's when someone could ask their insurance company, hey, this is what I'm looking to do, or my mortgage company. They're going to be looking at that title report and making that determination at that point in time.
Really, the emphasis here is on residential dwellings. Wouldn't apply to anything in the Williamson Act, because you're, through the Department of Conservation, you're limited on the number of buildings you can have on your property through your contract.
I think it could apply to the Williamson Act if there's nothing on that parcel land.
Yeah, true. You can have so many, buildings.
But this is not just for a single-family house. If someone wanted to build a shed in their backyard.
For pertinent structures, yeah.
Structure.
Yeah, hunting lodge, whatever, as it said.
Woodshed, barn.
But this is,
That's garage.
We have that covered in the ag ordinance.
Just barns.
This would
Just
extend.
barns, yeah.
This would kind of extend that to parcels that are not agricultural, though. Also, so 1 acre or larger, they could do something to the same provision.
And also, if they want to use those materials, it's something they can't just go use anything. If they want to use some that's an exception to what's the standard code, they'd have to get probably building officials
That's
okay.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Well, I think the other thing is, and somebody mentioned the windows and so forth in Title 24. I mean, I know there's been structures, permitted through Amador County's Building Department, built in the upcountry area that claimed exempt on Title 24 because they're not on the grid and never going to be on the grid. And Title 24 and all the energy saving requirements were all about electrical energy conservation. And they've claimed exempt and been constructed as such. This allows for that type of provision to be utilized, again, in areas where it's applicable.
Yeah, I think it gives some flexibility to the building department and basically to the people. I think it'd be a good thing.
Aaron, I want to call out on page 5 under permit review, basis of approval. It says, except as otherwise provided by this chapter, dwellings and appurtenant structures constructed in compliance with this chapter need not conform with the construction requirements prescribed by the latest applicable editions of the various codes. Then on the very next page, under electrical requirements D, it says that the installation, like second paragraph, the installation of electrical wiring shall be in accordance with provisions of the current version of the National Electrical Code for family dwellings. I know for a fact that the current version of the electrical code requires that a bathroom exhaust fan be attached to a humidity sensing switch or a separate humidity sensor within the area. That's another example of these new codes that come out in every revised edition that are onerous and largely ridiculous, but nevertheless fall within the current version of the code. I don't think it was the intent of our discussions in the Public Works Committee to see current version of codes utilized in this.
You think this needs to go back then? Because one thing I noticed is we're missing some pages too. If you start on the second page, page 1 of Article 8, and we only have the odd numbered pages.
Well, that's the state regulations that you're seeing those pages of, so only the ones that were applicable to this scenario were put in. I mean,
You see the other pages?
I don't know.
This has to come back anyway. This is the first.
This is about our ordinance.
For the full board, we need to advertise a public notice to move forward with adoption of an ordinance to address this.
Today,
your every other page is a victim of a scanning when you have a double-sided copy, and it
Let's make sure we have all the pages in next time.
Today's request is for direction to staff to proceed with advertising this and bring it back for adoption. So there's nothing final that's going to be decided today.
You, as Supervisor Boitano stated, when you address on page 1 of that Article 8, seasonally or permanently occupied dwellings, hunting shelters, guest cottages, etc. Did the committee consider at all looking at the exclusion of those permanently occupied dwellings?
When I sent out a bunch of questions to other building officials in several other areas, and I followed up with phone calls, and that was not a prohibition put on our discussion. It was, how are other people implementing this policy, and what could we do? And again, the response I got from some of the rural counties was it was a good thing, because if you excluded the single-family home, then someone that's got their house that they built in the 80s without a permit, they could never get that into compliance unless they brought the whole structure up to the current code. And then the difference between a vacation home and a residential home, I don't know how we would define the difference between those.
So clear something up for me. They built their house in the 80s. They didn't get a permit. Are they paying property tax? Are they subject to property tax if they get caught?
Most of the time they are.
Assessor doesn't miss too much.
So then they didn't get a permit, and then they're not paying property taxes. Wouldn't they be subject to pay the property taxes all the way back?
Maybe a better question for the assessor.
Yeah.
I would say yes, but
How many people are actually going to come back and pay fees and bring their house into compliance?
I don't know.
They've been living that way for 25, 30 years.
It'd probably be when they went to sell the place is when that would happen.
I can just see them now saying, I want to be legal.
Probably, yeah. I mean, the only time you'd run into that scenario is they're, getting on in years, and they pass on and leave it to their kids, and they're stuck with this albatross.
So,
And there's a lot of them out there. I could take you up some roads that scare you folks.
well, and to that point, I mean, let's say they built a structure that they did it without permits, but they built it to code of 1978 code. Now they have a situation where they want to bring it into compliance now, and they don't have to bring it into compliance in 1978 code. They have to bring it in compliance in 2014 code.
With sprinklers.
That's
I understand
where
that,
the difference lies. I mean,
Here's my issue, if they haven't been paying taxes, then we all have.
yeah, but
that bothers me.
I don't think there's that many that aren't paying taxes just
No,
because they
that's
didn't get a
pretty thorough.
permit.
Well, I could take you to 2 right now. They don't even know these 2 houses exist.
Some of my concerns are the wordsmithing in this document, and some of my other concerns is do we want to, like it was brought up here, so someone, like that example I brought up, so someone built a bathroom 10 or 15 years after they bought their home or constructed their home, and they didn't take out a permit. Let's just say they did everything according to the rules and regulations. They did not put a ventilation system in for the restroom. Now, according to codes, they have to have a ventilation system. They have to have their own separate light switch, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the ones that did do that, let's just say 10 years after the fact, in the 2000s, the guy put a ventilation system in, but he ducted to another room or to the attic. Now we're going to go back and have him say, oh, that's not according to code, now you have to duct that to an outside source.
That would be the current procedure. But if you had something that
Right.
wasn't permitted, it's like it doesn't exist, so you got to bring it up to the current code.
But
Yeah.
if we do that for the ducking, we're going to have to do that for the light switch that Supervisor Plaz brought up, and we're going to have to do it for everything else pertaining to that bathroom.
That is correct.
Has to be a GFI switch.
And you have to do it
Has to be a lot of things.
for
The-
sprinklers, for
the-
windows.
The
and
toilet has to be the new water, gallon and a half, whatever it is, per flush, and everything will have to be changed. I
Yeah,
don't know if
exactly.
we want to do that.
Well, that's like, if you don't pass
That's the way
this,
it is now, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
if you don't pass this, then that's the way it is.
Right, but I mean, do you want...
My understanding.
Do you want to do that to all the residents that are out there that we don't know how they built that bathroom, for instance?
Well, that's why we want to put this in place, so they have an avenue to get into compliance without having to come up to modern codes.
What's the ramification if all these houses go to that specification then, that you, I forget what you called it here, non-conforming or whatever it was? What was it?
Limited density.
Limited density, yeah. What's the ramification of that?
We talked to
Then they'll be coming in wanting reduced assessments because they're limited.
Wow.
Where do you
No.
see...
Sky
where do you
is
see
falling.
A waiver of plans might occur.
The sky is
If you had
falling.
something very simple that can be, it's a single story, it's got a kitchen and bathroom, or say just a kitchen and a sleeping quarters and an outside, an outhouse or something like that, you could waive the plans. It just needs to be sketched to convey what you are doing. Now, if you're going to have some electrical on that, you need to show where that's at, or plumbing, so that can be inspected. Again, one of the other goals is you can inspect these things at one inspection at the end. Again, if you covered up plumbing, then that would make it harder to do that. You'd want to get continuous inspections throughout for electrical or plumbing, but two-room structure, something simple, could have plans waived. And again, if they're a simple structure, then there's built to this ordinance, they wouldn't have engineering to check. Lateral stability or gravity loads.
So you, as the chief of the department, do you feel comfortable with this?
I do.
You know, Aaron, there was something else in here on page 7. It was talking about a minimum reserve 50 gallons of potable water available. Is that, I mean, I don't recall that in our discussions. I don't believe that's a caveat for a new home built today.
But if these things can be built off of the grid, they can be built in a dry camp. So if you had a dry area, you'd want to have at least 50 gallons of water there, if you're not connected to a well or electrical system.
But I guess what I'm saying is a home built today that's on a well doesn't have 50 gallons of potable water as soon as the power goes out in reserve.
I guess what I'd say
Unless
is
you're gravity fed.
If you're
I mean,
trucking
it's-
water into your cabin, you want to have 50 gallons available. I believe that came from the Humboldt Ordinance. If that was your desire to get rid of that, we could.
You got a dry camp, you got to have 50 gallons of water.
Well, I hate to bring this up, but the next paragraph down talks about having at least
2,500 gallons of water. Yeah, which our current regulations are, you got to have a 2,500 gallon firefighting water tank or pay us $900 and we'll forget that. So is it really about health and safety? Or is it really about collecting a $900 fee instead of having 2,500 gallons on hand?
What I was looking at is because I looked at this earlier, it's kind of, tossing around in my mind. I was thinking the same thing, about 50 gallons of potable water, but yet we were mandating they're going to have 2,500 gallons of storage. What about if someone wanted to build like a dry camp hunting cabin? And where you go there, you're there 1 or 2 days, and that's what. So there's still a few issues in this.
Right.
Yeah, I would recommend not getting too into the details, because we're really just trying to gauge the board's intent, whether it wants staff to go forward. Some of these issues could maybe even
Flushed out.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you were saying you wanted to go to lunch.
That's not why I made
What's
that
the
comment.
board's pleasure then? Do you feel like moving forward with this and allowing staff to spend more time on it?
You got somebody who wants public comment session?
Come on up, Catherine.
Catherine Evett, Volcano. This is actually the reason I came to the meeting today. And since I'm being taped by TV, I just want to say I'm speaking for myself as a private citizen today. I'm an owner builder. We had our house properly designed. We paid all the permit fees. We had all the inspections. We paid taxes. Even so, I recently had to get homeowners insurance, and I had to, on the checklist, say that the house conformed with code. And I think the assumption is the code at the time the house was built. I'm just, what I'm hearing from you is kind of a need for two different things, or an express need for two different things. One is some need to get non-compliant structures into compliance, and that this would be a way to do that. And that kind of makes sense to me. If you've got, we know houses in my neighborhood, I've seen them, that were built without the proper permits, don't comply with any code, really need to be brought into compliance somehow and brought into the system. So there's sort of the retrospective aspect of it, which I think you can deal with one way. What concerns me more is opening any owner-built residence in the future that's on any parcel, an acre or bigger, up to this in the unincorporated area of the county. I noticed that the state regulation suggests that this kind of code is suitable where the predominant land use is forestry, agriculture, timber products, grazing, recreation, or conservation. And I think if you look at, say, Sierra pines or Amador pines or some of those places, maybe it's not a good idea to be allowing homes that, according to the way this is written right now, could be approved with only a final inspection. And having been through building house and other people building houses, I don't know how you could check half of these things without having the periodic inspections. Now,
Catherine, that's addressed in this.
Well,
the ordinance addresses if there's in-wall plumbing and or electrical.
Well, it looks awfully discretionary is my concern. And so I think that the language could be tightened up more, and so that you had things. And I don't know, the aversion to bringing people up to current code. What code standard do you actually go by for a new house if you don't use the current code, the 1950 code?
Well, something else, Catherine.
It's just not very clear.
This allows you to use an earlier code.
And something else, Catherine, it's like if people have cabins up country where they go there and there's, when I grew up, we had a cabin, still have it. It's up country. It's very, very rural.
Yeah.
I'm sure the windows don't meet energy codes. They don't meet fire codes. There's no sprinklers. You go and you stay there. Oh, we used to run cattle. You'd stay there running cattle. It wasn't a real fancy camp, but it met the intent. It met the need. Now, maybe their ag building, there may be an option for that. But if somebody has a hunting cabin, you got to have Energy Star windows and the fire-resistant windows. You're going to have sprinklers. And how do you get sprinklers on a cabin up country that, say, runs off a spring, not under pressure?
Yeah, Supervisor Annette, I think you're actually making my point, which is there's a difference between hunting camps and cabins that are located in remote areas that are not permanently occupied and permanently occupied homes. And I understand, I read the materials here, I went back and read the code sections that weren't in the packet. So I kind of get what's happening here. But I think it is different when you're talking about prospective single-family homes that could be of any size on any parcel, an acre or larger, anywhere in the county that's outside a city sphere of influence. And I don't know that it's really in the county's best interest to be creating two different classes of homes. Those that are fully inspected and pay, their full way all the way along, and those that aren't. And I wonder, even though if you have recordation for these prospective homes as being approved under this code, how much a buyer is really going to understand the significance of that. So, I'm not opposed to it. I just think it needs more work and a lot more thought, and really looking at what problems are you trying to solve? Are you simply trying to get around the modern building codes, which we've heard expressed? Are you trying to bring other buildings into compliance, which we've heard expressed? Or are you trying to look at places where, it might not be feasible to meet building codes or practical or, sensible, like the situation you expressed, Supervisor Neto?
I would say combination thereof.
Well, it's not real clear in the ordinance. And
I think it all has to be
used to have to interpret law, I can tell you, it's not very clear. So that's my comment. Thank you.
If you could break the issues out, it might be.
Well, it's some of all of the above. Right down Stony Creek Road, you have an area where there's no power available. Without, crazy cost to extend power out there. There's houses built out there right now that are off the grid, no power available. There's lots of places in this county, particularly in the unincorporated areas, where not when you're in a neighborhood such as Catherine described with Sierra Pines and so forth. I mean, I look at that as a neighborhood, but and in most cases those are within services districts too, I believe, like the Pine Grove, anyway, services district, and there's provisions in here that calls out that if it's within a community services district and they make a statement that it's unlikely that they'll be providing services to that area in the near future, then that's one of the caveats required to get an LDRD permit. But there's lots of areas where it's prohibitively expensive to run power to, or all the other things that are required of modern building codes. And there's nothing wrong with the houses that were built in 1975 to the then building codes that everybody seemed to declare at the time they were safe enough to live in and there was no exposure to life and limb. But now all of a sudden it is, because a bureaucrat says you got to have fire sprinklers running through the attic.
Well, I don't have an issue with those houses, but I do have an issue if they were built without permits and inspections. That's my issue, and I guess that comes from a long-standing being in the retail business of hardware and that sort of thing, lumber products, and some people used to come in and the guy got all ticked off at me because he wanted to use number 12 wire to wire his 220 water heater. And I said, you know, you can't do that. It's not the code. You know, some of the things that I've witnessed in my 30-plus years that people try to do is pretty astonishing sometimes.
But I don't see where this ordinance impacts that, other than in a positive way of bringing, if they were built
If they
without,
bring them up to code, but I mean, and maybe the 1975 ones could be brought up to the 1975 code. I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay, that's where I'm getting at. If they were built without permits and ostensibly not to current code back in the day, where are we right now? We're in a situation where they're non-compliant. They either stay non-compliant because they can't afford to bring them up to current day standards,
Exactly.
or they come into compliance through some of the discretion allowed under this ordinance.
My only other issue is, you know, if they built a house and it's never been permitted and they've never paid property tax.
Well, then
they're out there.
Then go after them.
But they're out there with or without this ordinance.
Yeah,
Doesn't
they're out
change
there.
that.
Then we have provisions to go after
Yeah,
them
and I
now
had a
that-
guy come to me and he wants to bring his 2 houses in, but he doesn't want any, you know, anything to happen to him that's going to cost him any money punitively. And I don't think that's right for the people that paid taxes all their life on their property and built their houses to code. It's not fair.
Yeah, I couldn't argue that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But at least it's better if he comes in than stays out there.
Yeah. That's what I'm getting at. The condition exists one way or the other.
Yeah.
So what do you do to address it? You know, we had a lengthy discussion at our last meeting, too, about folks from up in Ted's district trying to say that, you know, it's some of our codes, some of our fees and so forth are what's causing, you know, a lack of building, or it could actually, through a reduction of fees, we could actually encourage a little bit of building to go on in areas without them. I think this is another way to maybe encourage some folks that have a piece of property to get a home built on it that helps at least save them some costs.
I kind of feel like we're taking a step backward by doing this for all permanently occupied dwellings. I really don't have much of a problem with hunting shelters or vacation homes that are in forested areas, or even detached bedrooms, guest cottages, but boy, kind of opening a can of worms.
Kind of where I'm at too, Richard, really.
Well, you know, I understand your concern, but there's some counties out there, they've had this around for what, roughly 20 years, and I know Aaron talked to a number of the building officials in different counties, And they seem quite happy. It works pretty well for them. They're not having big issues. And I mean, I don't know what more I can say than that. I mean, they're doing it, and it's working. It's not one county or two counties. I think honestly, talked to probably 4 or 5 counties, and it's working well. Now, I can't argue with that myself.
Well, and if it's perceived as a step backward, I guess I'd have to ask the question, a step backward from where? What,
How many people are going to actually go out
well,
there?
Well, no, let me finish. What is so euphoric about our current situation that stepping back from some of the current regulatory environment that we're in is a bad thing?
What's it going to fix, though? How many people out there that built without permits are actually going to go out and get the permits?
I don't think that's the sole purpose of this ordinance. It's one of the side benefits that this ordinance brings, but it's not the sole purpose.
As I see it, is to get off of the standard building requirements and allow people to build without sprinklers and some of the other current requirements. Now, I didn't
such as you voted against that at RCRC, right?
I'll tell you that, but
right.
I think it is going to bring up an insurance issue for people, especially, I mean, insurance companies right now are looking at houses in heavily forested areas, and if they don't have access, if they're not keeping that 100-foot barrier, if they don't have proper access to water, whether it be a pond or something else, I mean, right now you've heard residents say that they're in jeopardy of having their insurance canceled.
Yeah, but I think the sprinklers they're in the inside, not the outside.
Yeah, I'm not seeing where this proposed ordinance is compromising.
Maybe we haven't looked at this as long as the committee members, and that could be part of the issue too. That I don't think the other 3 members of the board would be as comfortable seeing this for the first time without having that more of an anti-government viewpoint.
Sorry.
I'd just like to say that I think there's a difference between something permanently that's going to be occupied and something that is a semi-permanently occupied dwelling or a hunting shelter or a vacation home and a recreational shelter. So, I think 2 things. Once this has to go back to the committee and be wordsmithed a little bit, and I think the other thing is we need some kind of variation. Is this going to pertain to all occupied dwellings, both permanently and seasonally, and all types of homes, both vacational homes, recreational homes, and hunting homes? Or is this going to be for some specific items, and I want those items to be out there in a application that shows what it is? If it's different than a permanent occupied dwelling, then I want that notified.
You want it verified then, yeah?
Verified that. I mean, I can understand, and I appreciate all the comments here today, and I think being that this is the first time I've seen this, not sitting on the committee, I think I would need more time and more thought process on this and more feedback from individuals, or maybe even check even some of the counties that Supervisor Oneto and Plaz brought up, that maybe hearing from other supervisors in those counties would be a good thing. I don't know. But I'd like to have this come back to me.
You know, that's something I was thinking might be helpful, maybe if Mr. Brusatori could check with some of those counties, and if if you have some correspondence from you talk to them, or if you get some correspondence from them, basically stating how the programs work for those counties, that might be helpful. Because I understand what the board's saying. They're having some heartburn over it, and I know Supervisor Plaza and myself and Public Works, the Public Works Committee, we worked on it for quite a while. We looked at a lot of different what-if scenarios, and maybe if you hadn't done that, you might be having, I can understand, having a lot of heartburn over it. So
we know how you feel, we at the Land Use Committee. The other thing is, I'm thinking that, I'm not opposed to, hunting cabin, vacation, use, and maybe you might want to look at the square feet on those structures, limit that to a certain amount of square feet.
You got to look at, too, if these buildings are going to have electrical and plumbing, it's going to be inspected. So we're just saying willy-nilly go out and just build it, we'll never look at it.
No, I understand that. My problem is the stuff that's already in the wall that we're talking about grandfathering in.
Well, and I agree, too, with some of the comments about being off the grid. I mean, if it's off the grid, you know, maybe we should look at things that are totally off the grid.
Yeah. Well, I'm just
as far as people buying these properties in the future, they would get full notification from what, checking with the records in Amador County?
If they get a title report, this agreement will be...
Shows up in the title report.
It wouldn't be real estate driven, it'd be actually be the title report.
The title report will drive it.
Okay, don't think you're ready to do much other than go back and gather some more information and bring it back to the board? Is that what I'm hearing today?
I would benefit from some direction as to what information you would like brought back before you. I can share with you the correspondence that I had with Humboldt's building official and Mendocino County's building official regarding the program. That's what the committee members have seen and are aware of. That may help. If there's additional questions that you guys would like answered,
Are those the two counties that have done it, or are there more?
There were two. There's more. Ventura's got it. Mendocino County's got it. Humboldt's got it.
Butte County?
Butte County's got it. I don't want to say there's 7 or 10 of them. There's a lot of them that did, but it's sometimes tough to get response from people. Mendocino and Humboldt were the easiest ones to get a hold of and talk with, and Butte also.
That'll give us a chance to, we have CSAC coming up, that'll give us a chance to talk to some of the other supervisors from those counties too.
You know, from my curiosity standpoint, how did they handle, you know, some of the situations like the unpermitted buildings that weren't paying property tax?
I didn't ask that question about the property tax. That was one that wasn't even part of the discussion. So is your question, if a house did say, hey, listen, I've got this house, I've been living under the trees for years, and I want to get permitted so I can sell it.
I'm getting too old.
So now, you know, I built it in 1985. How do I go back and pay those taxes? Is that the question you're... Okay.
Is there a provision that says, though, that you can't sell it if it wasn't built to code or permit? I think you can sell it as is. I mean, I bought a house in San Luis Obispo that was said right on the disclosure statement, you know, 4th bedroom was added without permits and without. I didn't care. I bought it anyway because I wanted the 4th bedroom anyway. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't sell something just because it wasn't.
It's just got to be disclosed.
My property, I had 3 buildings that were constructed outbuildings without permits, and that was listed right on there.
Yeah.
You know, look at all the old houses in some of the incorporated cities here that are, you know, post and pier block or post and rock, and they're able to sell and people are able to get loans to buy those. So.
One other question I had for you, Aaron. Maybe two, I want to know if their Chapter 1510 on all these counties that you just mentioned, is their wording exactly the same as it is in here, or they have modified it, or they have amended theirs in any way, shape, or form? I'd like to see what those are, too.
I can give you the ordinances from the different counties that we looked at, if that would help you. We chose one to start from, which was Humboldt, as a template. Let's start from here. It was 90% correct. Let's make the 10% of corrections, which are more applicable to Amador County. That's how the ordinance was drafted. But each of them has slightly different language contained in them.
Other counties, that'd probably be helpful too to see their ordinances. But the other counties, did they have the seasonally or permanently occupied dwellings anywhere in their counties?
They were letting
Countywide, I think.
It was countywide. Unincorporated areas were allowed to build to this standard.
So there was no restriction to heavily forested or areas or timber production, ag, grazing, recreation, conservation?
I don't recall that. I'm not saying that it's not the case on some.
And there was variables, different places, different ordinances.
It'd be helpful to see those ordinances too.
But I think some of them had, you know, if it was within a city or a CSD, it had to get basically somebody signing off saying, yeah, we're not reasonably, in the reasonably foreseeable future, we're not going to be able to service that with services.
But at the same token, we didn't want someone's ability to build to be predicated on trying to get a response from CSD serving them.
I think before the rest of the board members are ready to move forward with anything like this. We just need to get a little more comfortable. We need a little more education on it. We didn't have the years of year-long discussion on this to see what was good and bad about it.
Well, and for the record, I'd like to say that the committee that did have a year to look at this really spent a lot of time looking it over, and not from the viewpoint of government is bad, but from the viewpoint that we can certainly help the citizenry by some relaxation of the regulatory environment we live in.
I recognize that, and I appreciate the committee's time on it. So rather than just make a decision today, a rash decision, I think the board needs to see that other information.
Would the board like to see this at another, just a regular item on the agenda for discussion before a public hearing is scheduled? Is that
what I'd like to see.
Could the discussion be held at a public hearing environment as well? I mean, just from a time efficiency standpoint?
Workshop. Just how about an agenda item? Is there any urgency in moving it forward?
I guess not.
I think you can get the information fairly quickly. On up, Catherine.
Never going to make any more.
What's that? Yeah.
Catherine Evett, Volcano. Just a suggestion. I used to write a lot of material for boards, and something I rarely see done here, but I think would benefit you here, is a little better analysis of what the issues are and what the potential solutions for them are. And in this case, I can see raising some of the issues like, grandfathering in old cabins, type of usage, location, things like that, in a table that talks about, names the issue, talks about what questions were raised, and then shows examples from other counties' ordinances of how they were addressed. And then that gives you a basis on which to really write an ordinance. And you can see what other people have done, how they've addressed the issue, and also make sure that it actually addresses all the issues that you've raised without having to, pick it out of the language of a fully written ordinance. So just a suggestion.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion on this? And then we'll come back after you get the information, Mr. Story, whether that be at our next meeting or the following meeting.
Do you want to continue this item or have a new item on the...
What do you want, by the next meeting?
Yeah.
Next meeting? Is that December?
Have a couple meetings.
You want to go to the first meeting in December? Does that give you enough time? Yep. Okay, so let's just, we won't continue it. Let's just agendize it, Jennifer, for the first meeting in December for continued discussion on this. With that, the board will break for lunch for half an hour or so and be back.
How long is or so I can just...
Just have heavenly, or will I have heavenly skin?
It's worth a try, and you will have heavenly skin, that's for sure.
You don't want to just try to get there.
That's right.
You want to pull it off. No, anyway, okay, go ahead. Tell us about it.
Well, the Hallelujah Lotion is the new line of our company. It originally was the Holy Goat soap.
Okay.
And you can see our soap on that end.
How big is this company? Is this yours?
It's a family-owned company. Okay. It's small. We sell out of our home. We sell at holiday craft fairs, and we sell at farmers markets. And we do mail order.
Now, how did you come up with the name Holy Goat?
Actually, my husband's a pastor. He's got a sense of humor, and it sounded...
So it's a takeoff like from the Holy Ghost?
Yeah, it is. It's a takeoff from it.
I didn't like it when they started calling the Holy Ghost the Holy Spirit. It kind of took a lot of the fun out of it for me. As a youngster, it was a long time ago.
Well, it's just a fun name that people remember, and that was the whole point, is we want them to remember our name.
Okay, now what makes it good about using goats for making soap?
The milk of the goat is a very moisturizing additive to the soap. And so we've got a very moisturizing soap, and it also helps with skin problems like eczema and psoriasis.
Okay.
And
tell us about some of the bars of soap here.
Well, we've got 5 different scents. We've got a rose, we've got a lavender, we've got a vanilla, we've got mint, tea tree, and then a super moisturizing. The tea tree is our biggest seller because we have people with skin conditions that use that, and along with the lotion to help their skin
So is there
conditions.
something in there other than the smell that helps with the...
Yeah, it's the natural oils from either the plant or the herb that we're using, like the tea tree oil. That one's got lemongrass oil in it.
And that's good. And this, what do we have here, the square soap?
Well, you've got the picture of our mama goat and her baby, which is very sweet.
Certainly
And then
is.
we've got our holiday collection in the next basket with our angels and our hearts and our sleighs.
And you could use these for tree ornaments.
Well, you could, yeah, definitely.